After the 90s ended, Sonic would find himself on a downhill spiral of quality that wouldn't end until recent years. Many consider the adventure games to be the last great Sonic games, and some consider Adventure 2 to be the point where it all goes downhill, with Shadow normally being the character people point to as a representation of when the series lost its way. Regardless of if you like Adventure 2 or not, it's not hard to deny that after it came out, Sonic had lost all steam. Or, at least, that's what people would have you believe. While I will admit, Sonic wasn't doing so hot on consoles throughout the 2000s, what most people seem to forget is that he had some pretty amazing games for the handheld systems, starting with Sonic Advance in 2002 for the Game Boy Advance, and eventually the Nokia N-Gage, under the name Sonic N. Boy, what a joke that was. Anyway, let's have a look at the Game Boy Advance version. The story is once again about Dr. Eggman wanting all the Chaos Emeralds and trying to conquer the world. Standard stuff, nothing too deep or hard to follow like the adventure games, just classic Sonic, which is what this game was ultimately going for, so no points off there. The game goes back to older Sonic game roots by allowing you to play as multiple characters that all have the same stages but different abilities. Although the difference here is that in order to complete the game and unlock the final levels, you do need to beat it as all four characters. The first character is of course Sonic. Sonic is the fastest, naturally, so you'll likely be spending most of your time zipping through stages really fast rather than exploring them like you can with the other characters. Sonic does have a few unique tricks though. For starters, his jump attack from Sonic 3 is back. Tap A while in a jump and Sonic will strike his foes with this weird gust of wind, or maybe it's a burst of light. I don't know. All I know is it's back from Sonic 3. Sonic can also somersault, like he could in the adventure games. I don't know what the point of it is, as you can still spin dash, but it's there. Sonic is also one of only two characters in the game that can grind on rails, like in Sonic Adventure 2. It's neat, but ultimately doesn't serve a purpose. Tails is of course the second playable character, and is once again the only character you should ever want to play as. He's not as fast as Sonic, and he can't grind, but he can once again use his tails to fly to the hard-to-reach places, and he's the only character that can swim, making the fourth boss a lot easier for him than for any of the other characters. He can also do his tailspin attack from Sonic Adventure, though you'll likely never use it as, again, you could just spin dash through everything. Knuckles is the third character. He can glide across gaps as well as climb up walls to reach places that even Tails can't get to. He can also glide underwater, which gives you the illusion that he can swim, but he can't. He can also punch people. Again, just spin dash. He can also float on the top of water for some reason. He can't swim, just float. I guess those huge gloves can be used as a flotation device in the case of an emergency. It's great to have Knuckles back in a role that suits him rather than just collecting emerald pieces, but he's still outclassed by Tails. Amy is the final playable character, in her first side-scrolling role. Too bad you'll never want to play as her. See, Amy is essentially this game's hard mode. Amy can't spin dash or jump on enemies to hurt them. That sucks. She instead uses her iconic Pico Pico hammer to, well, hammer people. She can do it in the air or on the ground. While it is cool to give her the option, it ultimately just makes things harder and slows things down. In order for her to attack anything, she has to come to a dead stop and smash it with her hammer, whereas everybody else can just spin dash through and keep the momentum going. It also makes going through the levels very tedious because, more than anybody else, you have to constantly be aware of your surroundings. You can't just hit down at full speed when an enemy's coming. You'll run right into it if you go too fast. Not to mention, she has to find other ways to build up speed to get up steep slopes. Again, because she can't spin dash. She's also the only other character that can grind if you care. She also has this weird super jump mode. If you press down and press the attack button, she does a big jump through the air. I guess maybe that's to compensate for her not being able to get up certain gaps, but it's not as useful as you'd think. I'd understand what they were trying to do with Amy, trying to give her their own gimmick, but it just makes her unfun to play as. I really like Amy, but she just keeps getting the short end of the stick in these games. The stages are classically designed, but also pretty generic Sonic fare. Neo Green Hill Zone is your standard tropical green level with a really strange name. It's a good way to start, if nothing else. The second level, Secret Base, is a generic techno-base themed level, but I actually quite like it. There's a bunch of zip lines you swing across, trampoline things to bounce on. It's pretty fun. Casino Paradise is your typical casino themed level, in that it's a giant troll. All you do is run into bumpers and go flying the wrong way. Casino levels may look awesome and are definitely a Sonic staple, but man, are they mean. Ice Mountain is your combination ice-water stage. This stage sucks. All water stages suck. It's no fun to play as anybody but Tails, and even that's being generous. Angel Island is the 5th stage, which is weird. It doesn't look anything like it did in Sonic 3, and it's way too big to be the same as in Sonic Adventure. Consistency is not something that Sonic Team seems to appreciate. This level is pretty cool. There's a lot of branching paths and stuff, but it's also the first time the game gets really pitfall heavy. You'll likely fall down bottomless pits a lot, unless you're, good at video games. Egg Rocket Zone is a single-act stage that's split into segments. You have 5 minutes to get to each segment before it falls off the ship. It's pretty hard and kind of confusing. Half the time I don't know where I'm going. Cosmic Angel Zone is technically the last level in the game, as it's a full-fledged stage and not just a boss fight or two. It involves gravity and walking on ceilings, so as such, it's a giant pain. The bosses are classic, all just Eggman and a machine trying to destroy you, normally with a silly gimmick and easy-to-follow pattern, like smashing you with a giant hammer or a giant spring. Of course, as I already mentioned, the underwater boss is a huge pain for anybody but Tails. You'll likely drown before you ever hit him. The weirdest boss is a robotic form of Knuckles called Mecha Knuckles, which you fight on Angel Island. Why? Isn't there already a robot Knuckles in Sonic R? He's just a pink Knuckles at first, and he attacks the same way Knuckles does in Sonic 3 and Sonic Pocket Adventure. But after a few hits, he becomes silver and starts shooting rockets at you. Out of his mouth! It's kind of ridiculous. The last zone, X Zone Creative, features 3 bosses. One is a recreation of the first boss from Sonic 1, and another is the first boss from Sonic 2, complete with remixes of the music and everything. It's pretty awesome, though not very threatening as a last boss, though the boss after them is pretty tough. The real final boss is fought in space as Super Sonic, shocker, but only if you get all the Chaos Emeralds. This boss is pretty tough, as you can only attack his head, and your rings deplete pretty quickly. Not to mention, he just constantly fires lasers and drones your way. As you can see, I'm not very good at it. The special stages in this game are pretty strange. First of all, to even get to them, you have to find a giant spring hidden in certain levels. That's weird on its own. But then once you're in them, you're free-falling down a giant tube on a snowboard trying to grab a bunch of rings and avoid bombs. It's pretty tough. It's not the worst special stage I've played in a Sonic game, but it's not very good either. I don't exactly know what angle to position myself at to get the rings. They just seem to go right past me. This game also has a tiny Chao Garden, but as you'd expect, it's not as good as Sonic Adventure 2's. You can only hold one Chao, and you can only give it fruits to enhance its stats. There's also minigames you can play. One's a rock, paper, scissors game, which is weird. The other is a memory game. Both games only exist to help you earn more rings to buy more stuff for your Chao. Your Chao can also be transferred to and from the Sonic Adventure games on the GameCube, if you have the GameCube Game Boy Advance link cable, which you probably don't. It's a nice idea, but not something that really works for a handheld Sonic game. The game looks and sounds great. The graphics are some of the best on the Game Boy Advance, and I love the style. It's very modern, yet classic. The music's not bad either, though not some of my favorites from a Sonic game. Although the Secret Base Zone music is pretty awesome. Overall, Sonic Advance is a great game. It's a very tried and true Sonic with a few modern twists thrown in. If you haven't checked it out, do it. You won't be disappointed. That is, unless you accidentally picked up Sonic Advance 2, but we'll talk about that next time.